Jackson Crow had lived alone in the Rockies for nearly 10 years, surviving on his traps, his rifles, and the silent rhythm of the wilderness, where every gust of wind and crack of a branch could mean life or death. And yet, despite his hardened exterior, he had never felt a connection to another living soul till the day he found the wolf pup, scraggly and wild, trembling in the snow with eyes that held both fear and cunning, a creature as untamed as the mountains themselves. And though he hesitated at first, instinct and compassion drew him close. He offered it food, patience, and the warmth of his cabin. And over weeks, the pup grew into a loyal companion, its instincts sharpening his own senses and guiding him through treacherous passes and blinding snowstorms, until one morning it led him farther into the forest than he had ever dared venture, to a hidden clearing where a half-buried chest glimmered ominously beneath the frost, its carvings etched with strange symbols and a sense of malevolent power radiating from it. And when Jackson opened it, gold coins, jewelry, and a medallion shaped like a wolf's head spilled into the cold air. And immediately a chill, unlike any winter wind, swept the clearing, carrying whispers that seemed almost alive, warnings of curses and death for any who dared covet its wealth, while the wolf circled protectively, growling low and eyes gleaming like molten amber in the dim light. And Jackson realized that this was no ordinary treasure, that its allure was as dangerous as the wolves and the winter itself, testing his resolve and courage, yet at the same time teaching him a lesson that no gold could ever impart, that survival, trust, and loyalty embodied in this fierce, untamable companion were more precious than all the riches buried in the mountains. And that true treasure was found not in wealth, but in the bond between man and beast, in the wisdom to resist temptation, and in the knowledge that some secrets of the wilderness were meant to be respected, not possessed. The first night after discovering the cursed treasure, Jackson could feel its presence pressing on his mind like the weight of a winter storm, each coin and jewel seeming to hum with an energy that made the hairs on his arms rise and sent chills crawling down his spine. And though he tried to ignore it, he couldn't shake the feeling that the mountains themselves were watching, that every shadow beyond the cabin's wooden walls held eyes, waiting for him to slip, to succumb to greed or fear, while the wolf now grown sleek and powerful, its coat a blend of silver and ash stayed close, a sentinel at his side, watching, listening, and communicating in ways Jackson had never known a man could understand. Its amber eyes seemed to pierce through the swirling darkness, seeing not only the predators lurking in the forest, but also the darkness stirring in his own heart. And as the wind howled through the cracks in the cabin, rattling shutters and rattling his resolve, he realized that the treasure's curse wasn't in the gold itself, but in the temptation it created, a lure that promised fortune yet threatened to strip him of his very soul. And every glance at the medallion with the wolf's head seemed to mock him, reminding him that only through restraint, courage, and the guidance of this untamed companion could he hope to survive. And so he stayed awake, night after night, listening to the whispers of the wind, feeling the pulse of the wilderness, and learning that in the silent communication between man and wolf, there was a kind of wisdom and protection far greater than any wealth, teaching him that the truest treasure in the Rockies was not something to hold in one's hands, but something earned through trust, respect, and the unspoken bond that could exist only between two beings who had survived the same harsh, unforgiving land together. Asterisk, asterisk, as the following days passed, the mountains seemed to conspire against Jackson, shadows stretching unnaturally at dusk, snowstorms rolling in without warning, and the cold biting sharper than any winter he had endured before, while the treasure he had uncovered lingered in his thoughts like a phantom, whispering promises of power, wealth, an influence that clashed violently with the loyalty and wisdom of the wolf by his side. The creature, now fully grown and striking in its wild majesty, moved with a grace that seemed almost supernatural, always alert, ears twitching at the faintest rustle of leaves or snap of a twig, and Jackson began to notice subtle signs that the forest itself was alive with unseen eyes, that the cursed gold had drawn more than just his attention. It had awakened something in the woods, something patient and dangerous, waiting for a single misstep, a single moment of weakness. And he realized with growing dread that greed, even in the tiniest spark, could be fatal in a place where survival demanded both cunning and restraint. Nights became longer, filled with restless dreams of shadows twisting into forms he could not name, whispers curling through the pine trees in languages that seemed to brush against his very thoughts. And always the wolf was there, its amber eyes glowing in the firelight, a living reminder that some treasures were not meant to be possessed, and that true safety depended not on the gold or the jewels but on listening, observing, and moving with respect for forces far greater than his own. And in those long, frozen hours, Jackson understood that the bond between him and the wolf was no longer simple companionship, was survival itself, a connection that defied the harsh wilderness, the cursed lure of treasure, and the darkness that threatened to consume any man foolish enough to believe he could claim such power without consequence, teaching him that the true measure of a trapper, of a man alone in the Rockies, was not in the riches he could amass, but in the wisdom to recognize danger, the courage to resist temptation, and the humility to follow the guidance of a creature as wild and untamable as the land itself. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. By the time Jackson realized the curse's full weight, the forest had become a labyrinth of fear and foreboding, each step toward the buried treasure a test of both courage and sanity. And the wolf, ever vigilant, guided him with subtle nudges and knowing glances, sensing dangers that Jackson could not, warning him of approaching shadows and unnatural stillness where the wind had stopped mid-air. And yet the pull of the gold was relentless, gnawing at his thoughts even as he tried to ignore it. Every coin and jewel etched with the promise of wealth and the threat of ruin, each glinting surface reflecting not sunlight but a dark, seductive whisper of what could be had if only he surrendered to temptation. Storms came without warning, snowdrifts piled against the cabin walls, and wolves' real ones howled in the distance as if answering some ancient call, while Jackson's dreams became tangled with the cursed gold. Visions of wealth turning into visions of blood and fire, the whispers of the mountains growing louder, sharper, pressing him toward obsession. And in that frozen, endless night, he understood that the curse was no mere superstition. It fed on desire, on fear, on every flicker of greed or impatience. And only by resisting it, by listening to the wolf's instincts, and by trusting in the bond that had grown between them, could he hope to survive. Every heartbeat became a lesson, every frozen breath a test, and Jackson felt the weight of centuries of greed pressing down on him, the echo of every man who had sought treasure in these mountains and paid the price for hubris. And it was in that crucible of fear and loyalty, guided by the creature he had nurtured from pup to protector, that he found clarity. Some treasures are not meant for possession. Some curses are too powerful for mortal hands. And the real wealth of the Rockies was not in gold or jewels, but in survival, in trust, and in the knowledge that the wilderness had chosen him for something greater than greed, for something far older, wilder, and infinitely more valuable, a bond that would last longer than any treasure, deeper than any snowdrift, and stronger than any curse that dared cross his path. Asterisk.